Rage on one side, Mono Black aggro on the other, and apparently, according to Nick Miller, there is a lot of junk mid-range here this weekend.
Apparently all over the room.
Yeah.
Curious to see how Andrew Schneider's list is against it. What I like about Mono Black aggro instead of Mono Red aggro is you just have more game against expensive threats, more answers to cards like Courser, Crufix, and Archangel of Thune. He's playing 3 Ultimate Price and 2 Heroes Downfall along 4 made copies of Thoughtseize, a lot of disruption for decks that are trying to ramp to one big threat.
Let's get it started with a Tormented Hero, shall we, from Mr. Schneider. 18 Swamps along with 4 copies of Mutavault. Ellenburg with a Temple of Silence. He's taking a look at a Courser of Crufix. So this should be fun.
That's my kind of mana base, by the way.
18 and 4?
18 and 4.
You better believe it. I'm right there with you. I am right there with you. If there was a Windbrisk Kites available, I would play that, but I'm right there with you, man. There's a Mutavault, followed it up with a copy of Brain Maggot. Let's take a look at the grip. You see a Scavenging Ooze, an Abrupt Decay, Hero's Downfall, and a bunch of lands, some expensive spells over there, and an expensive mana base.
And a lot of Andrew's creature base is informed by the presence of Sylvan Caryatid in all of these decks. We've seen mono green aggro lists that play a lot of 3-power 2-drops.
Oh, brushy.
Goros Chainwalkers in decks for similar reasons. Andrew's 2-drops here, Thrill Kill Assassin, of course you just attack through Sylvan Caryatid with that, and Brain Maggot, you don't particularly care if your opponent's blocking that because it's doing other things. Then in the 3-drop slot, he has 4 copies of Masterpiece, 4 copies of Herald of Torment, of course Flyers are very good against Sylvan Caryatid, and then 1 copy of Magus' Marauder, which is again good against that card. So Andrew's creature base, a bunch of 2-power 1-drops, and then creatures that are all good in various ways against Sylvan Caryatid.
There you do see Brain Maggot. It is an enchantment creature. Do not forget about that. Enchantment feels kind of slapped on there, but it's certainly relevant as far as cards like Deicide and others are concerned. It does take the Scavenging Ooze. You see Ellenburg is going to play us Overgrown Tomb untap. That's 2 points of damage his way. Got to be happy about that if you're Schneider.
Absolutely, yeah. All these aggro decks try to capitalize on the prevalence of Ravnica dual lands in decks.
Schneider going to cast a Thoughtseize this go around. It looks like maybe it's time for an Abrupt Decay in response. I've got a feeling that Brain Maggot's going to go away.
Absolutely.
Schneider knows that as well. At least he thinks so. And there it goes. So the Brain Maggot's going to bite the dust. There you do see Thoughtseize now going to show you a Hero's Downfall, a Courser, along with that Scavenging Ooze, and then 2 Godless Shrines and a Temple of Silence. Again, expensive mana base. This deck is trying to take advantage of the fact that 1 Temple's coming to play tapped, and 2, if you want to keep up, you have to pay 2 from your lands.
It is the big edge that aggro decks get in the format, is capitalizing on the kind of things that are going on with David right now. In similar matchups, you know, blue-white versus blue-white or junk mid-range against junk mid-range, doesn't really matter what allotment of lands you draw, but when you're playing against decks like mono black, it certainly matters.
Schneider's not trying to go toe-to-toe power level-wise.
No.
Because you can't really do that against junk mid-range. That deck is full of rares and mythics all over the place, and their cards are just better than yours in a vacuum. It's trying to kill them before they actually get their cards on the table.
When you're winning, they usually have spells left in their hand at the end of the game, the other deck.
Yeah, little Thrill Kill Assassin, that thing is unleashed, so it's a 2-3. But first, we're going to attack with the Tormented Hero. Going to put Ellenburg down to 14 and pass the turn back over to David, who will draw another copy of Abrupt Decay.
Now, what's interesting about Andrew's list, among other things, is the presence of Master of the Feast, not a card we've really seen much play. If he took the Hero's Downfall last turn, it's possible he's trying to open up a path here for his Master of the Feast to stick, and this Abrupt Decay, if it ends up targeting that, could be a really bad turn for Andrew.
Tough part here for Schneider is that the top card for Ellenburg was a Hero's Downfall, and he kept it on top. Thoughtseize. Let's see what this is going to take. Abrupt Decay is going to take care of the Thrill Kill Assassin. In the meantime, you see that Courser, you see that Scavenging Ooze. The Scavenging Ooze is the one that's got to bite the dust. That one's easily the more scary of the 2 cards.
These graveyards are pretty flush with creatures at this point, so
Schneider writes down the contents, does resolve his Thoughtseize. See if he wants to fire at Mutavault or drop the Master, and he does want to drop the Master. Going to attack here for 2, and Master would actually be insane in this game right now. Unfortunately, Ellenburg on the top of his deck does have a Hero's Downfall, so you do see the 5/5 flyer, and he did a really nice job of setting things up to make it really good in this situation. Just didn't work out for him the way that he wanted it to. I like this card.
I think it's potentially good against decks like this. There's a couple of problematic cards for it, but decks that are trying to block on the ground with Sylvan Caryatid and Courser Crufix could be susceptible to this card.
Absolutely. Hero's Downfall going to take care of it. You see an attack here for 4 from the Hero and the Mutavault. See if Schneider did have a follow-up play. He does not. So Ellenburg's at 8, and he did draw an Advent of the Worm off of the Master's trigger, and now it looks like a Banishing Light was the draw. So even though Schneider got off to a pretty nice start here, things just didn't line up the way that he wanted them to this game. You could see what he was going for, though. I think that's the important thing, as here's a Banishing Light.
Yeah, the upside is that David does not yet have double green. So
That's
he cannot
true.
cast the Courser or Advent in his hand. So Andrew's still holding on here.
I actually missed that as here comes the Mutavault, going to put Ellenburg down to 6. Ellenburg, of course, has some very big draws here. Not only does he have a card like Blood Baron or Archangel, but now even a green mana's pretty good. And there's a pretty high chance he'll have to take 2 to be able to use it, though.
You're just so used to these decks always having their mana. Right now, David is bottlenecked on green. So if David did have his second green source of mana, I'm sure this game would not be close right now. But Andrew still has some hope.
Looks like they want to make sure they have life totals in order here. Going to consult and make sure everything is good to go on both players' side. There have been some Thoughtseizes thrown around and some Shocklands untapped and everything of that nature. So Schneider and Ellenburg just making sure the life totals are kosher here. But for Schneider, he's just trying to hold on. There are some very, very big draws here for Ellenburg. Hey, even a card like Obsidian can come rolling off the top of the deck. You don't need 2 green for that.
Yeah, there are some high impact draws, but there is also a lot of low impact draws as well.
Yep.
So it'll be an exciting couple draw steps here for David.
Wouldn't be too thrilled if I was David to see maybe a card like Underworld Connections come off the top of the deck. Another Advent of the Worm would be pretty poor. So there are definitely some misses here, but we're going to see what he can find as he's going to slowly untap. He'll take a draw here, and it's a copy of Hero's Downfall.
That'll play.
That'll work for now. Schneider going to draw a card here. Going to fire up the old Mutavault, and that is going to bite the dust to the Hero's Downfall. See if Schneider has a follow-up play, just plays a swamp, passes the turn back. Looks like he's flooding out a little bit here. The tough thing here, as Ellenburg does pick up a green source of mana, is that Schneider's deck does not have reach.
Correct.
Like the red decks do, lightning strikes and things of that nature. Ellenburg is going to play that Overrun Tomb untapped. He's going to go down to 4, and he's just going to pass the turn back over to Schneider, who will untap that lone swamp. He will take a draw. Has he found anything to do yet? You see the 1 swamp in his hand. That is a Thrill Kill Assassin. Unleashed, past the turn back, and here comes the Advent of the Worm.
The only real reach card, it's not even clear you can totally count it like this, in Andrew's list is 1 copy of Mogis' Marauder. That's his 1 burn spell in essence. And Tormented Hero in certain spots, but certainly no Skullcrack, Lightning Strike style deck.
Another copy of Hero's Downfall picked up for Ellenburg. That may have been his 4th one that he's drawn this game, and they have played a huge role. You see him looking at his graveyard. You can see the first 3. The 4th one is in the grip. Take a look at the graveyards here. Ellenburg does have that Courser in his hand. He looks like he's going to cast maybe the Hero's Downfall right now, and he will, to get that Thrill Kill Assassin out of the way. In for 5 comes the Worm. Schneider going to go down to 11. And the one thing here that's really important for Ellenburg is that he's got some real closing speed out there with Advent of the Worm.
And it was pretty important there for David to find the answer to Thrill Kill Assassin because he couldn't block it with Courser profitably. So he's either racing, which is dangerous here, or trading his Worm token, which I'm sure he'd rather be using to kill Andrew.
This is a Rakdos Cackler. Will he leash or unleash it? It is going to be unleashed, so it is a 2/2. Top card of Ellenburg's deck right now is a Sin Collector. He's going to draw that. He's going to turn over a copy of Obsidian, and he is really trying to close this game out very quickly now. There's a Sin Collector. Schneider going to reveal Swamp that I think Ellenburg thought was in his hand, and we certainly knew it was there. And now here's an attack for 5.
Can't be too surprised by that.
No, not at all. I think Schneider, as he does untap and draw his card, realized that he needs to master the feast right now. See what he found.
Well, even Master of the Feast doesn't get him out of it now, right?
I mean, it's not great in this situation. I think that's one of the few cards that can actually get him into things. I suppose, actually, I take it back. Herald of Torment would have gotten the job done, too, if he has that in his deck. And he does have 4 of those. So he would have been able to actually, bestow that on the Rakdos Cackler and kill him. That's why he rubbed his hands together. He actually had an out in that
Herald
situation.
Of Torment was game.
And that's actually terrifying that he had out in that situation because he looked like he was basically dead. But David Ellenburg going to win this game over Andrew Schneider. Junk mid-range up a game over Mono Black Aggro. You've got Schneider's sideboard in front of you. That's where he's headed. What can he find?
4 Lightbane Zombie, 4 Duress, 2 Heroes Downfall, 2 Mogis Marauder, a Freakus Cure, a Doomblade, and Ultimate Price. He can bring in additional removal spells here. I like the Lightbane Zombies as well. He may want to get away from Master of Feast in this matchup just because if David's bringing anything, it's just more removal spells, more copies of Abrupt Decay, more copies of, Heroes Downfall, whatever, those kind of cards. So I think he's going to want to be, a little more Lightbane Zombie and a little bit more Duress-oriented.
Other side of things here, 2 Putrefies, a Banishing Light, 2 copies of Golgari Charm, 2 Thoughtseize, 2 Boblights, and Underworld Connections, 2 Sin Collector, 2 Lifebane Zombies, and a Blood Baron of Escopa. You gotta love Blood Baron in this matchup, of course. That one's obvious. The rest of them, I just like interaction early and often. So I would want 2 Bioblights. You gotta like Golgari Charm as well because, we talk about how it's incidental that these creatures are enchantment creatures. That's what makes the charm so good. Master of the Feast, Herald of Torment, Brain Mag. It's all enchantments.
Yeah, Brain Mag is a especially curious one to be an enchantment. Because it's not associated, most of them are at least named in some way, associated or named with a god. Brain Maggot just doesn't sound like it's imbued with some sort of greater spiritual purpose.
Yeah, one of Erebos' good friends. They've gotten some work done together over the years, I'm sure.
I don't know if they're like colleagues. They might be, you know, buds or whatever. But
one thing about Schneider's deck list that's really interesting to me, and you know, this is kind of the progressions that's going to go through Mono Black, I think, or you know, capital B, lowercase r aggro. It's just, you know, what's the right 2-drop, what's the right 1-drops. You know, he's got the 12 1-drops in Gnarled Scarhide, Rakdos Cackler, and Tormented Hero. 2-drops, he has Thrill Kill Assassin and Brain Maggot. It's just what's the right config, because you got a lot of options at your disposal.
yeah, Spiteful Returned is a card that Andrew's not playing at all.
People love that card.
And it's super good.
Yeah.
That card is super good. So there's a lot of options for this deck available to it. He's trying to use Master of the Feast here. I don't know if that's necessarily better or worse than Spiteful Return. They have different applications in different matchups.
And the other thing, too, is what's the right configuration of removal versus discard as well. I think that part's really tough. You got 4 Thoughtseize. That seems like it's pretty automatic at this point. Ultimate Price, there's 3 copy of those. Hero's Downfall, there's 2 of those. Is that the right numbers and configuration for your mana curve? Tough to say.
It's not even clear to me that you want 4 Thoughtseize main. I mean, I understand it's a default here, but
Yeah.
to me it seems better. You're better served, you know, using your early mana of casting creatures and then using removal spells to clean up what your opponent plays, and then sideboarding Thoughtseize for decks that, you know, are playing with Supreme Verdict or whatever the case may be. But.
And that doesn't even bring in some cards in the equation that we haven't even mentioned. You're playing a black deck with no pack rats.
Right.
You know, and no Desecration Demon hanging out over there either. Could easily start Lifebane Zombie, opting to put them in the sideboard. So, you know, that's one of the things that I find really interesting about the Mono Black aggro deck is just you've got a lot of options at your disposal. Which is best? Is it kind of just a case by case on the metagame, or is there always one way to go? We're going to find out here. Snyder's off to a 3-0 start. And, you know, we've obviously got a couple weeks to figure it out as well.
For a monocolor aggro deck, there's not a shortage of options for ways to build mono black.
Feels that way with Mono Red, too. Got a lot of options at your disposal there, too.
Absolutely.
Tormented Hero to begin things for Schneider here again in game number 2. You can see his hand. He's got a Rakdos Cackler and another Tormented Hero over there. So perhaps the very deadly bunch of 1-mana 2 power creatures by turn 2. There's a Temple of Plenty there from Ellenburg.
Although those are draws that get blown up pretty easily by something as simple as Courser Crufix.
Schneider going to play another copy of Tormented Hero. Looks like it's a Rakdos Cackler as well. Going to unleash that. So the beatdowns are imminent. Going to come across for 2. Ellenburg going to go down to 18. And now for David, he better have something to do on this second turn. He does draw a card. It's a copy of Manic Influence. Overgrown Tomb coming to play tap. That's a pump of the fist if you are Andrew Schneider.
That is way too, this draw is way too slow for the kind of opening that Andrew has.
6 damage coming across Ellenburg on a 3-turn clock immediately. He's going to go down to 12. Schneider going to play a Mutavault and Master of the Feast. And you can see why Schneider likes this deck.
Slow down! Yeah. And now, I mean, if you're David, what are you going to do? Are you going to spend a turn saying, all right, I'll draw a card and Hero's Downfall your Master here? That's pretty rough.
Andrew Schneider is presenting lethal on the board for next turn in combination with that Mutavault. Actual lethal. And now Ellenburg's got to take 2. Gotta love that. That's like drawing a card.
Yeah.
And he just has to pass the turn back. Oh, well, Master will give him a card. And let's see what he picks up. It's a copy of Overgrown Tomb. Schneider will draw a card as well for the turn. Mutavault, is it time for you to come onto the red zone here? He's going to lead off with a Thoughtseize. You see Ellenburg may have a response here with Hero's Downfall to take care of that, and that's okay. Schneider gets to see exactly what's over there. You see a Scavenging Ooze along with, another copy of Hero's Downfall. A Courser, an Archangel. Nothing great there, though.
Yeah, trying to think what the outs are here. I guess that I would take Scavenging Ooze because the riskiest thing for David to draw here is Golgari Charm next turn, so you do not want to give him the option of Golgari Charm plus Scavenging Ooze. None of the other cards are too significant. Obviously can't cast Archangel next turn, and the 3-mana spells on their own just don't do enough to catch him up.
They're simply too inefficient. As Mutavault's going to fire up here, and everyone's going to come into the red zone. Ellenburg is going to go down to 2. He's going to untap and take a draw here. He finds a copy of Temple of Plenty. That's not going to save him. He can play a Courser, reveal the top card, and gain life. But if you play Courser, you're giving away some information. So he's just going to concede the game. And Andrew Schneider, with a very aggressive start, ties things up.
That's the opening that Andrew's looking for right there.
Yep. And that's some of the appeal of this deck. You solved with the ability to play 2 power 1-mana creatures, 3 by turn 2, but also his opponent had to play the lands untapped and Overgrown Tomb to take 2 damage. That's essentially like drawing a card, and he actually had to use the Hero's Downfall or whatever move spell he had to take care of Master of the Feast, because you can't let that hit you either.
I like this a lot. Andrew right now going to his sideboard and removing the Master of the Feast. It's just hard for me to imagine this card being good on the draw given the abundance of removal that David gets in the post-board games.
Maybe it's Life Being Zombie coming in here because Master of the Feast is so much better on the play than on the draw. Not to say that Life Being Zombie is in his deck, but that seems like a good place to start. Maybe Duresses too.
You can only have so many 3s.
Yeah.
And Herald of Torment's not necessarily bad as well, you know. And David's very good at blocking on the ground, so flyers are good in general. So
the flexibility, the bestow. If he would have drawn Herald of Torment game 1, he won.
Yeah. But you can only have so many 3-mana cards in your deck.
Yeah, definitely true.
Is the issue.
There's a lot to like here.
Yep.
And this deck, again, it's not to say that the deck is perfect at this point, but you can definitely see the thought process and why he's 3-0 at this point, and the fact to be able to run down somebody like that. And we saw in that game, just run them over before they're able to function.
And even had the Thoughtseize to break up if he had one critical piece to catch himself back up there. So Andrew displaying the power that Mono Black potentially has.
You just have to imagine that this is the deck.
Yeah,
some sort of configuration.
It's on the top of my list of things to be building once the cards are available online.
Maybe this is the beatdown deck that people are looking for. I don't know, but you have to imagine that this has got to be a deck. Maybe it's supposed to have the Red Splash because Spike Jester is so underplayed and so good against Sylvan Carrington and control decks. We don't know, but you know, just watching that game, and it's been a while since we've seen a start like that. When I saw that start, it made me think of the Zombies deck. Mm-hmm. Starting off with Diregraph Ghoul and Gravecrawler, and then playing a Messenger on turn 3. And Master of the Feast is quite a good card. It's no Drops Messenger, but few things are. But it felt like that.
I think that if I were to build this deck, I would want to have maybe another copy of Mogus's Marauder and Painseer, and fewer discard spells made and more removal spells.
Forgot about Painseer. Forgot that's a card you can play. Yeah.
Also not in this list.
Yep.
There's a lot of good cards that Mono Black aggro has access to.
That's what testing's gonna kind of unveil, right? You play some games, maybe Painseer isn't, doing what you want it to do. It's not drawing a card enough against, appropriate matchups, things like that. Maybe Pack Rat's too slow. Maybe there's too many Bioblights hanging around, and that's not the card you want to be playing either. So, again, he doesn't have either one of those cards. He's opted to play Brain Maggot and Thrill Kill Assassin. Those are choices that he has made for this tournament. 3-0 so far.
It's a very disruption-heavy build.
Yeah.
Although it is, and what is nice is Thoughtseize and Brain Maggot can also, carve a path for Master of the Feast. Your opponent will often have one removal spell that can contain it. Do they have 2? That's a lot less likely.
That's what he tried to do in game 1.
Yeah.
With the Thoughtseize and Brain Maggots, and it was unfortunate for Schneider that there was just a high density of Heroes Downfalls drawn from Ellenburg.
Water, please.
That's the rough thing, and he had the one on top to take care of the Master, and then was able to close out the game. So. Again, I actually like the fact that he can carve out a path for Master of the Feast.
Yeah. It does look a little weird. Why are you playing all these discard spells alongside your spell that gives them a card every turn? But the reason is that they just don't have that many cards that can necessarily handle it.
Yeah, and the goal is just to hit once. That's the goal. That's really it. Dylan Husing saying that, he's been testing this deck a lot, and it's quite a great deck. Master is insane. It would not surprise me if that card's very good. We did not see it a lot of last weekend in Cincinnati. Again, people taking basically established decks and putting some new cards in them. But, this is a deck that's looking to try to establish itself. The cards are definitely there to do so. And, again, Master of the Feast is this card where you look at it and you see the drawback, and it's kind of scary. But at the same time, they made the drawback a very certain way. They could have just made it like a Howling Mine, and they didn't. They made it so that you draw when they draw.
So it's a lot better against sorceries, at least.
Yeah.
So it's, Detention Spheres and Supreme Verdict don't necessarily line up that well against it.
Well, it's time for game number 3. Going to start off with the Temple of Malady. Will Ellenburg taking a look at another copy of Temple of Malady. Going to leave that on top. Over to Schneider we go. You have to imagine he's going to have a 1-drop. He just drew 1 in Tormented Hero. He's going to put that into play. Tapped and passed the turn back. Started all 3 games with that bad boy. Ellenburg going to untap and take a draw.
His deck is nothing but, so it would stand to reason that he would have a 1-mana creature on turn 1.
Let's see what Ellenburg wants to play here. You see he's got a lot of those lands that are going to come into play tap decisions here for the junk mid-range player. The power level of the deck, again, off the charts. However, you have to deploy those lands in a certain fashion. He's going to play Godless Shrine untap, take 2, pass the turn back. Reeks of a removal spell, and you do see the Golgari Charm there. Schneider going to take a draw, picked up a copy of Rakdos Cackler.
It's got to be something.
Yeah.
He's not taking 2 damage for no reason here.
Yeah, you got to imagine it. The best place to start here for Andrew is just to start by attacking.
Test the waters.
Yeah. And that's exactly what he's going to do. In for 2 we go. Did Ellenburg take 2 for no reason? Hard to believe that would be the case. And here's Golgari Charm with a -1/-1. And if you're Schneider, you actually got to be pretty happy about that. One, because it's only trading 1 for 1, but two, you've got some really powerful enchantment creatures in your deck.
And you still got to effectively do the 2 damage because David had to play it off of an untapped Ravnica tool. And that Golgari Charm has a lot of application against Andrew's deck here, as you see. In fact, Brain Maggot.
Brain Maggot's going to reveal a hand of Putrefy, Courser of Krufix, Archangel of Thune, and a Temple of Malady. What do you take, Patrick?
Probably the Courser, as if David does find an untapped land on turn 3, it's pretty rough if David gets to cast it. You'd rather have him, have to spend a turn casting Putrefy to unlock his Courser. Although if David has a removal spell in hand, he may want to just take the Putrefy instead.
And the Maggot will take the Courser. Ellenburg going to draw a card. It's a Temple of Plenty. Not much of a surprise to see a land that comes into play tapped here from him. And again, if he's playing, let's say that's an Overgrown Tomb, for example. If he's playing Overgrown Tomb untapped, it feels like you won there. To Putrefy, that feels like a win there. Sylvan Caryatid, the card that Ellenburg's looking at, deciding if he wants to keep that on top or the bottom. And it looks like he's going to go with on top here for the 0-3. Going to pass it back to Schneider. It looks like the old Brain Maggot's going to get to deal some damage here. You see a Master of the Feast was the draw here for Andrew. He also has a Mutavault in his hand as well.
A little rough to cast this Master of the Feast into an opponent who has Putrefy in hand. Andrew would ideally like to sculpt the game a little bit where he can have that Putrefy be bled out on something lower impact, clearing the way for Master of the Feast.
I think the thing that Schneider's thinking about right now is because he knows Ellenburg's hand is, what did he keep on top of his deck?
Yeah.
That he gave some thought to before placing it back on top. Again, we know it's a Sylvan Caryatid. It's not that high impact of a card, but if you're Schneider, you have to tread pretty lightly here. There are a lot of powerful cards over there in the junk mid-range deck. He's going to begin his turn by playing a Mutavault.
If I was in Andrew's seat, I wouldn't be too stressed about it because it's a complicated decision right now if David wants to keep a land on top.
Sure.
Based on how his hand is set up. So I would think that it was probably a land. It's a Caryatid, but it's all the same. It's a mana source.
The attack for 1 from the Brain Maggot. Going to put Ellenburg down to 17. You see Schneider trying to figure out exactly how he wants to sculpt this game. He has to be scared of one card right now. It's really Archangel of Thune. He knows that that's there. Ellenburg is working his way towards it. You see Schneider's going to tap some mana here. It looks like he wants to deploy some 1-drops, a Rakdos Cackler. Does he want to deploy the Gnarled Scarhide as well? And he does. So that's going to come into play. So a little army here, along with Mutavault there in the back row.
He is playing into the jaws of another Golgari Charm potentially, but usually these junk lists, 1 or 2 in the sideboard tops.
Temple of Plenty here from Ellenburg. Going to take a look at a Goblet Shrine. So that's the 5th land that he needs for the Archangel, but it looks like he's moving that towards the bottom. And he is. Interesting.
Well, he has kept the Caryatid.
Is he priced into casting it this turn versus just putrefying something?
I think so. It's kind of the same thing as casting a Putrefy here. You remove 1 creature from dealing damage to you this turn.
Yeah.
And it sets the table for Archangel to be cast the following turn. This is risky because this all gets blown up if Andrew has a discard spell, a Lifebane zombie, even Ultimate Price or Hero's Downfall to answer the Archangel. But this is the path that David has selected.
And he does deploy the Caryatid, so Schneider's going to play a Swamp very, very quickly. You see him moving a little bit faster now. Again, does have a Master, also has a Herald of Torment, and now a Cackler in his hand. So a lot of options here. And it looks like he's going to serve in with some creatures in just a moment. Decisions. And an interesting thing here, too, is that now he knows that Ellenburg can actually cast the Archangel. This would be a pretty good time to actually put down the Master of the Feast, potentially. But he's actually just going to fire at Mutavault, come across here for 5 points of damage. Ellenburg going to go down to 12. Schneider can follow this up with a copy of Rakdos Cackler and pass the turn back. How do you feel about firing up the Mutavault as opposed to playing one of those 3 mana spells?
I like firing up Mutavault here. I think he wants to save Herald to make 1 threat a 5/5. And the problem that I have with Master of Feast is it's possible the game gets to a spot where both players are saying go for a while, and in that world it's so bad to have Master of Feast in play because your opponent's seeing 2 cards a turn. So given the pacing of the game, I like what Andrew did last turn.
Ellenburg going to tap 3 mana. Looks like it's time to putrefy that Brain Maggot. Going to get the Courser back to his hand. Does have a Temple Garden in his hand that he can play. He'd have to take 2 to do so, go down to 10, and then he could drop the Courser. Courser would actually stand pretty tall in this battlefield as well. And that's exactly what he's going to do. See the top card of Ellenburg's deck here. We know about the Archangel. He's going to turn over that top card, and that's a Golgari Charm. Ooh. That's a big one.
Oof.
So again, Schneider knows that last card over there in Ellenburg's hand. Can he beat the combination of Archangel plus Courser? We're going to find out here as he takes a draw.
Plus Golgari Charm off the top. I mean,
Yeah.
there's a good start.
Absolutely. Thoughtseize. There goes your Archangel. That was step number 1.
Andrew's still not out of the woods by any measure.
No.
That Golgari Charm is going to be really good here, but that was a good start.
The question is, how do you attack? You know, do you fire in with the Scarhide? I mean, if you fire in with all 3 of those creatures, you're going to lose 1, but you're going to put your opponent down to 6. Do you fire in with Mutavault as well, put your opponent down to 4? If you play one of these 3 drops, do you play Herald and give up on bestowing it? Do you play Master and hope there's not a removal spell, even though there is a charm on top, so you already know the opponent has a removal spell? Again, you've got some real decisions to make here.
Yeah, this is a really tough play. I would probably fire up the Mutavault, I think, and just send it with all of them.
It's going to opt to fire in here for 6. Rakdos Cackler going to bite the dust. Goes down to the Courser. 4 damage going to go up through. Ellenburg going to go down to 6. And Schneider's going to deploy. And you see he's a little bit torn too, because it seems like he wants to bestow Herald. And you can certainly see why he would want to do that, but he's just going to play this. There's Golgari Charm. Top card is a Temple of Malady.
Actually, I like this play a lot from Andrew, because with the Courser in play, he's going to get to know if his Master's good. You know what I mean?
Sure.
He's definitely going to get to bleed out the Golgari Charm this way. And if the top card of David Zek is something that can kill a Master, he just doesn't cast it for a while.
Yeah, like that Abrupt Decay.
Exactly. But if the coast was clear, if the top card is a Blythe, then you can cast it next turn and probably win the game.
My problem with that is that I think I would much rather have Herald because it's 2 cards in 1.
Yeah,
That's the thing that I like about Herald in this situation.
No, Herald is definitely the more powerful card. I think the fact that Andrew is armed with the information from the Courser Crewfix makes the equation a little bit different.
Draw is a thrill kill assassin here for Schneider. Actually a pretty good draw in this situation. That can actually be the card that, you know, gets Abrupt Decayed. It looks like Schneider's going to fire Mutavault and fire into the red zone here. It would be a pretty aggressive turn.
Yeah, I don't think he can afford to do that here.
He's just going to go with Thrill Kill Assassin, going to unleash that and just pass the turn back. Master of the Feast still in his grip. Ellenburg going to untap. You've got an Abrupt Decay add to the grip, and that'll change some things. Obsidian Ghost Council, the top card.
Andrew could really use his copy of Mogus Marauder. I don't know if he boarded in the second one.
That'd be a game ender. Just going to pass the turn back to Schneider. Will Ellenburg going to take a draw. Looks like another Thrill Kill Assassin was picked up for the turn. Schneider, best attack right now is a Thrill Kill, and that's what he's going to send in with. And that could actually buy out the Abrupt Decay. And if you're Schneider, you got to be happy about that exchange. The question is, will Ellenburg actually cast it? Looks like the answer is no. A little bit of patience here from David. Going to go down to 5. And Schneider going to follow this up with another copy of Thrill Kill Assassin.
That's important, as it now makes Bogus' Marauder more likely to be an out in the event that Andrew draws it.
I think it also makes it more likely that Ellenburg does that, which is casting Abrupt Decay, which is going to try to keep unlocking that Master of the Feast. Top card is a Forest. Ellenburg going to go up to 6 from the Courser trigger. We'll see what the next card's going to be. And this is another copy of Courser. So Ellenburg going to tap 5 mana. Obsidian Ghost Council going to come to town. A little drain, a little brain, as Ellenburg is going to go up to 8 and Schneider down to 15. Tide's kind of turning a little bit here.
Absolutely. Andrew really only has 2 copies of Hero's Downfall as an out to this Obsidian, and Hero's Downfall is taxed doing other things too. Those coursers are problematic as well.
Schneider draws a card for the turn. It is a Swamp. Gonna fire Mutavault. Looks like everyone's gonna come to the red zone, push some damage through. Do you like this Mutavault attack?
Absolutely, got to do something.
We've got some blockers here. Looks like Courser's gonna be on the Mutavault here. So damage is going to come through. Ellenburg's going to go down to 4. Schneider's going to lose his Mutavault. He's going to play that, and there's the Master of the Feast, and that's going to try to close out the game. Ellenburg, Obsidian's going to come in, trigger up to 6. Schneider down to 13. Courser going to be added to the grip. Top card's an Advent of the Worm.
All right, Andrew's still playing.
Now, the interesting thing with Advent here is that that's actually going to go to Ellenburg's hand because of the Master Trigger going to be able to cast it. So even though that Advent seems like it's not really going to do anything, that's a 5/5 that's going to come in. So that's scary too.
Well, at least Andrew is in a spot here where almost certainly Mogus' Marauder is lethal. He's played into at least that spot.
Gnarled Scarhide also going to be able to get the job done here as far as Bestow is concerned. So there are some big draws here as Ellenburg is going to play that Courser. Obsidat, I don't think you can block it. I think you have to let it through. That's not the kind of exchange that you want to make in this situation. So will the Ghost Council attack? You see Ellenburg giving this a little bit of thought on if he wants to attack with it or not, but I think it's a pretty safe attack.
Yeah, I had to imagine you're just phasing out next turn. This coming turn anyway. And Andrew can't afford to block with his Master of Feast.
That card's the card he's trying to use to close out the game. So we'll see if Ellenburg comes to the same conclusion that we do, and he will attack with the 5/5. Schneider's going to go down to 8.
Yeah, again, Andrew needs this in play to allow for things like Gnarled Scarhide to be an out.
So Snyder's going to untap. You get an Advent of the Worm. David's top card is an Overgrown Team. You see Schneider rub his hands together. Did he find what he's looking for? He did in game 1. Will he in game 3?
Yeah, spot removal spell offers no assistance here, as David can still block everything on the ground. And he is just dying on the way back.
Yeah.
Nothing else can block here.
As good as those aggressive black creatures are, 2 of them are unleashed, and Scarhide ain't no blocker either, so.
Naturally comes unleashed.
Yeah. What a deal.
What a deal.
Uh-oh, if he's slowing down, yeah, that's pretty telling if he can't attack with that. The big question here is, did he draw a copy of Herald of Torment? Because by losing the Mutavault, he lost the ability to bestow the Herald of Torment. Now, not to say that attack wasn't correct, because I still felt that it was, but again, that's just kind of the trade-off there with the attack with the Mutavault. Ellenburg going to go down to 4.
Yeah, Andrew did his best to push in some damage here.
And he drew a copy of Brain Maggot, but that's not going to do very much because Advent of the Worm is going to be cast in response. Here comes a 5/5.
And now the life gain from these 2 coursers is, I mean, this is essentially just lethal coming.
And we can't forget about Obsidat coming back as well. So Ellenburg is going to go up to 6 right now from the trigger. Snyder's going to go down to 6. It's a tight game, Patrick.
Kind of, yeah, in some respects.
It's definitely tied. Here's a Temple of Silence. That's going to come off 2 courser triggers. Ellenburg is going to go up to 8. Scry. Take a look at a Sylvan Caryatid. Going to consult the grip. Looks like he is pleased with that being on top of his deck. And now it's just, how do I attack? I think you're safe to probably get in the red zone with everybody here.
Yeah, again, Andrew's only got 2 things that are capable of blocking. And is it feasible for him to chump block? Well, with Intro on 6, yeah, he has to block both of the 5-power creatures as well.
So here are your attacks, and those are the only ones.
Oh,
so
wow.
This is a big deal. Actually, the Feast looks like it's on blocking duty. It looks like Andrew wants to try to play a longer game here.
I don't know how he plays a longer game, though.
I mean, you trade the Master with the Worm, you chump block the Obsidat. I mean, you're just trying to get yourself more draws. That's all. Like, I don't love I guess you can block like this, too.
Yeah, I guess blocking this way, Mogus's Marauder is still an out. So, yeah, this is fine.
Yeah, I guess he better draw it. Pass the turn back. Schneider. He's ready. He's ready to draw. Takes a draw. Thoughtseize is not going to do it. David Ellenburg does defeat Andrew Schneider 2-1. Junk mid-range. Still getting it done. Defeating Mono Black Aggro.
I think that Andrew's list in the post-board games is a little short on spot removal. We saw very little of it. And he's losing to the board. That's the issue that I have with trying to beat this deck with Thoughtseizes when you're playing a beatdown deck is every single card they have against you is so high impact. I don't think you can afford to say, well, I'm going to take their most relevant card, because their second and third and fourth most relevant cards still matter quite a bit against you. I'd rather try to beat them on mana efficiency and use removal spells to take away their turns.
Sure.
Instead of trying to attack their hand and gain their key card. Because if you Thoughtseize them in their hand is something like Abrupt Decay, Courser of Krufix, Archangel Thune, and another removal spell, you can't really carve a path with using your Thoughtseize that way. So I would rather be a little more Lifebane Zombie and kill spell oriented and less Thoughtseize oriented.
So the first question that I kind of think about with this deck when we were watching in action is, some of the cards, and because there are obviously other cards that you can play, I think the 1-drops are